Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here with us tonight. We're going to go ahead and get started with this evening's listening session. We'll start off with sort of an overview of what we're going to be doing tonight, get you oriented. We'll have a short video that we'll have everyone watch, and then we'll get as quickly as we can into having you all share with us your feedback, because that's really why we're here. So my name is Jason Dedrick. I'm a policy analyst in the city manager's office here at the city, and here today to act as just sort of your overall facilitator and convener for the event. Really glad that you are here. Your involvement tonight is just one part of a lot of literally hundreds of community members that have provided feedback on the community safety initiative. So we're glad that you're here with us tonight, and that the information you're going to share with us tonight is crucial for council, and they're very much looking forward to getting your feedback and then making decisions based on that. So thank you for your time, and how much just that we really value you spending your time with us tonight to provide feedback. I'm joined tonight by three other colleagues here at the city. One, Kevin Alltucker, who's the project manager for the Community Safety Initiative. Also Laura Hammond, who's the city's community relations director, and Fabio Andrade, who is with the Human Rights and Neighborhood Involvement Office. And so they'll be here as well, providing support for the meeting, and potentially maybe able to answer any questions or deal with any issues that come up. So for tonight, the goal of this listening session is really to gather your opinions and perceptions about the Community Safety Initiative, or CSI, if you hear us use that terminology at any point during the meeting. Our conversation tonight is really limited to the Community Safety Initiative and the funding associated with that as directed by council. So while there are many issues related to community safety and policing in the community, we're really trying to keep your feedback directed towards the Community Safety Initiative, because that's where council most wants your feedback right now. We're going to be giving you some more feedback or some more background on the components of our community safety system and the initiative here in a couple of minutes. So I'm not going to go into detail a lot on that right now. But we wanted to be able to give you at least a little bit of context for why we're here tonight and what this listening really helps us with. So in July of last year, in the wake of the killings of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, council heard a lot from the community about safety concerns that folks who identify as Black or Indigenous or other people of color have in our community. And really, they wanted to initiate a process to get feedback from representatives of those communities on any changes or additions to our community safety initiative that would best respond to the needs of those communities. So we already had a process going, but the events of last year had our council sort of take a pause and say, let's loop back around and make sure we're hearing everything that we need to hear. So there were some focus groups last December to get that input. And then council also directed staff to provide additional opportunities for the rest of the community to provide input. And so today is the second of two listening sessions. And we also have a community survey that's out that we'll talk a little bit more about in a minute, that was developed for that purpose of getting more information to council. I have a couple slides that I forgot to advance. So again, goal for today to really listen and get your feedback on the Community Safety Initiative as currently proposed. So keep that in mind as you're providing your feedback. In terms of the timeline, I just reviewed some of this. We had those BIPOC engagement focus groups back in December. Here in March, we've had the community survey open, as well as tonight, the second of two community listening sessions. And then in May, we will have a final report on the process, and City Council will have a work session to take the results from that work and then move forward with that. So in a moment, we'll be sharing with you live a webinar that will provide you sort of a baseline understanding of the different components of our community safety system. The gaps in service that have been identified, where the city is challenged to meet that demand, and some strategies that have been proposed to fill those gaps. You'll get a little bit more of an understanding of the payroll tax that funds the plan and the Community Safety Initiative, and how dollars are proposed to be used. There are several options for how you can engage tonight in this meeting. You can just listen anonymously to the meeting as a way to just get more information about what's going on and just hear what others in the community have to say. You can also be a speaker, and we'll talk in a minute about how you'll go about doing that. Third option is to complete the survey that we'll provide a link for in the chat. And you could also speak tonight, as well as provide written comments in that survey. So really feel like there are multiple ways for you to engage or choose not to engage tonight. So in terms of meeting protocols, again, our role here tonight is primarily to gather information and to listen. So we're going to get out of the way as quickly as we can so that we can gather that feedback. We're not really prepared to answer a lot of detailed questions about different services or aspects of the payroll tax. In part, that's because we just want to be holding the time to hear from you. We certainly could circle back at another time, or if there are questions that you have, you can submit those as part of the survey, and they could be things that council picks up on. So I really want to focus our time on getting your thoughts and concerns so that we can share that with council. If you're having any technical problems tonight or have a question about the process, please do submit that via the Q&A function here in Zoom. We're recording today's meeting, and it will be posted on the Community Safety Initiative webpage. We also have a third-party service that's providing a written transcription of tonight's session. The recording and the transcription will make sure we have an accurate record of what's happened and that we can also look back on that as we're compiling things for council. You can turn on and off the captions tonight as you wish there in the Zoom toolbar. That's available for you. So in terms of providing comments tonight, if you're joining us on a computer or a tablet and you wish to speak, you can use the raise hand function at the bottom of your screen and you'll be added to the queue. If you're joining by phone, you can indicate that you would like to speak by pressing *9. Everyone tonight will have about 2.5 minutes to respond or to provide feedback. That's really about providing equity and making sure that everyone has the opportunity to share tonight. When we call upon you, we'll ask you to unmute yourself and begin speaking. For those of you that are on a phone, you can press #6 to unmute yourself. A timer on screen, which you can probably see there, will monitor your time, and when the yellow light is lit, you'll have 15 seconds left. If you're on the phone, you won't be able to see the timer, but be warned that you'll be automatically muted after 2.5 minutes. Our meeting tonight is scheduled to go until 8, and we're going to honor everyone's time by concluding as close to 8 as possible. In the event that there's not enough time for us to hear from everybody who would like to speak tonight, we ask that you fill out the survey with your feedback. If we get through everyone that wants to speak tonight and in sort of a first round, and you'd like to make an additional comment and we still have time, then we will go ahead and have a second round. We can even have a third round if there's time, but really our goal is to make sure as many people get that first opportunity to speak as possible. If for some reason you would like to provide feedback in the survey, that link again will be provided in the chat. And if we for some reason aren't able to get to all of you who would like to speak tonight, again, filling out that survey is the best way to go, and that information will get shared with council. So next steps moving forward from tonight. So again, tonight is the second of those two listening sessions. The online survey that the link is provided for closes tomorrow. So we ask you to get your thoughts into that survey as soon as possible so that staff can start working through all that information and then preparing that report for council in May. And then finally, we have developed a series of 4 questions that are meant to just sort of tee up your feedback tonight. You don't have to stick to answering these questions. They're meant as just a way to get your thoughts going. These were the ways in which council sort of most wanted to get feedback, but certainly don't feel like you have to limit yourself to that. So these 4 questions are: what are your impressions of the City of Eugene Community Safety System as presented in the webinar? Are there other gaps in the community safety system besides those that you will see identified in the webinar here in a few minutes? Do you believe the identified strategies address the gaps in the City of Eugene Community Safety System? And would you change the proposed allocation of funds for the Community Safety Initiative? So again, these questions are a way to get you thinking. You can provide feedback on none of these, on all 4 of them, on something completely different. But we really, if you do have comments on these, council would really very much appreciate that. So at this point, I am going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Fabio, who's going to get the webinar started.
Hello, everyone. I'm Mayor Lucy Fennis, and I want to thank you for taking the time to learn about the Community Safety Initiative, or CSI, and share with us your thoughts about how it can best meet the safety needs of our community. We are in a unique and pivotal time in our country. The killing of George Floyd sparked protest, reflection, and many conversations about policing and safety. If you identify as Black, Indigenous, or a person of color, this topic is front and center for you and those you care about. I understand these conversations are not easy and take an emotional toll. So thank you for being willing to be here and invest time and emotional energy to participate in this process. Near the end of the last budget cycle, City Council heard from many community members about the desire to reevaluate how we prioritize spending on policing and community safety. Council responded by initiating a process to get feedback from communities of color on potential changes or addition to the CSI. The CSI provides us an opportunity to start this process of adapting spending on policing and safety to community needs and desires. It has been a couple of years since we asked our community to engage in conversations about the CSI. Those conversations happened before this pandemic, and the protests against racism shifted the national dialogue. Council wants to know if our community's perspectives on public safety and spending of CSI funds have shifted. And for that reason, we are providing opportunities for the entire community to lend their perspectives too. I want to be clear about what you are being asked to do. The focus of this process is on the Community Safety Initiative, the CSI. As you will learn, we will begin collecting a payroll tax in January, and this funding is dedicated to addressing community safety needs. These are new dollars. They are not related to the city's general fund budget that pays for many city services, including police. We're asking for your input on how to use this new revenue source consistent with how the ordinance allows for those dollars to be used. We want to respect and use your time wisely, so clarifying the scope of what you are being asked to look at and provide feedback on is important. Council has also convened an ad hoc committee to look at policy changes on policing and safety, and that work is ongoing. The CSI and ad hoc committee processes are separate conversations at this time. As you will learn, the CSI is an attempt to address some gaps in services that have gone unaddressed for years related to our police, fire, and emergency medical services, prevention services, municipal court processes, and the needs of those that are homeless. The CSI is intended to address gaps in the system that are impacting our community every day. It was designed to look at the entire system, not just police or public safety services alone, in order to help connect people to services and improve quality of life by preventing problems earlier. The purpose of this webinar is for everyone to better understand the CSI, including how payroll tax funds can be used, desired outcomes we have identified, important community safety challenges we are facing, current strategies proposed to address them, and how you can add your perspectives to the conversation. How do you think the CSI can best respond to our community safety needs? This webinar will explain the CSI and help you be ready to engage in more discussion and be able to share an informed perspective. Thank you again for your participation. I look forward to hearing your perspectives as we work together to craft a community safety system that is responsive to our evolving community needs.
Welcome to an overview of Eugene's Community Safety Initiative. My name is Kevin Altucker, and I've served as the project manager for the Community Safety Initiative for the past several years. I'm excited to be here today to share information about the initiative and appreciate your time. When we think about the traditional justice system, most people think of police, attorneys, court, and even the jail. Within Eugene, these services include the Eugene Police Department, the City Prosecutor's Office, and the Eugene Municipal Court. However, when we talk about a community safety system, we are including programs and services in addition to the traditional justice system. This more holistic approach to public safety includes prevention services, social services, and alternative resolution programs. It's a system that moves away from a one-size-fits-all approach. The city and our community partners make up this system that works together to improve safety, reduce the cycle of crime, and improve community members' quality of life. The City of Eugene's Community Safety Initiative is based on this system and includes police, fire, emergency medical services, 911, municipal court, prevention, and homeless services, as well as community programs that work together. When the Community Safety Initiative was being developed in 2018 and 2019, the Eugene City Council approved a set of desired outcomes they wanted to achieve. These outcomes were based on information about identified needs and gaps in services, as well as input from the community and other best practices, including recommendations from 21st century policing. The outcomes included building trust, increasing safety, focusing on prevention, and strengthening partnerships. Within each of those outcomes, there were also more specific measures, including things like resolving cases more quickly, reducing response time, enhancing staff training, and increasing services for community members. In order to fund the initiative, in June 2019, the Eugene City Council passed the Community Safety Payroll Tax Ordinance. The ordinance authorized a payroll tax to provide funds for community safety services, including police, fire and emergency medical services, municipal court and prosecution services, prevention and homeless services. These are the services included in the Community Safety Initiative. Both the City Code and the City Charter limit the use of the payroll tax revenue to funding these specific services. There is flexibility in how the payroll tax funds are distributed among these services. The distribution is not prescribed by either code or charter. This is an important point as you think about what our community safety needs are and how best to address them. Both Eugene employers and employees working in Eugene will pay the tax starting January 1st, 2021. The amount of tax owed by each differs. Generally, employers and self-employed persons with a physical address in Eugene will pay a tax rate of 0.0021. That's 0.21 of 1% of the wages paid by the employer. Employers with 2 or less employees pay a slightly lower rate. Employees working at employers located in Eugene are divided into 3 groups. Employees making minimum wage pay no payroll tax. Employees making between minimum wage and $15 per hour will pay a tax rate of 0.003 on their earnings. For a full-time employee earning $15 an hour, this equates to a tax of $7.80 per month or $94 per year. Employees making over $15 an hour will pay a tax of 0.0044 or 44 cents for every $100 earned. For a full-time employee earning $20 an hour, this would be $15.25 per month or $183 per year. The payroll tax rates were forecasted to generate approximately $23.6 million of new revenue per year. This was identified as the amount needed to make some of the systematic changes that could improve the city's community safety system. We'll talk about what specific programs and strategies those dollars could be spent on in a moment. We also know that there may be some changes to the amount the community safety payroll tax will generate and how long it will take to reach that $23.6 million. The impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic on businesses and the community, as well as how quickly our economy is able to recover, will affect how much money the payroll tax generates for community safety services. While we don't know the specific impacts yet, we are monitoring this closely to be able to provide a better estimate of how much the payroll tax may generate. The estimated $23.6 million per year was based on a specific package of community safety services that roughly provided 65% for police services, 10% for fire and emergency medical services, 15% for municipal court and prosecution services, and 10% for prevention and homeless services. Even though the tax rates were based on the desire to generate $23.6 million, and that amount was based on a specific package of community safety services, the City Council does not have to distribute the funds in the same way as shown here. As previously mentioned, the funds do have to be spent in these service areas, but the distribution can change. One important thing to know is that the city has already invested approximately $8 million in some of these services as gap funding before the payroll tax would start to be collected. These funds have gone into prevention services, including services that support at-risk youth, continuation of the community court program that connects nonviolent offenders cited in downtown Eugene with social service providers, public safety services, including adding 10 patrol officers to create a citywide street crimes unit, adding 5 community service officers who can respond to non-emergency calls for service, adding 4 staff to the 911 call center, expanding jail services by 10 beds, funding for the ambulance transport gap coverage, and funding municipal court and city prosecutor services to meet growing needs. Homeless services, including a year-round dusk to dawn safe sleeping program, ongoing support for programs serving people experiencing homelessness, including the Lindholm Center, the car camping program, and the rest stop program. Funding for 15th Night, a program to reduce youth homelessness, and a homeless services coordinator within the city. The current plan is to use a portion of community safety funds to pay for these services. If it were determined to not use community safety funds for these services, there is no other identified ongoing source of funding. There are a couple of oversight mechanisms in place to ensure that the community safety funds are properly spent. Community safety funds are placed in a separate account specifically for community safety services, so they can be easily tracked and monitored. Each year, an outside auditor will prepare a report on whether the community safety funds were used to increase funding to the 4 categories of community safety services previously discussed. Separately, a citizen advisory board will also generate an annual report documenting the city's use of the community safety funds. A city charter amendment passed by the voters in 2019 caps the payroll tax rate for community safety funds, so that can't change without a public vote. After reviewing the comprehensive report and receiving public testimony, no later than June 30th, 2027, the City Council must decide whether to refer the payroll tax to the voters or let it expire. If the Council decides not to refer it to the voters, or the voters choose not to continue the payroll tax, the tax will end after December 31st, 2028. In 2027, the Citizen Advisory Board must conduct a comprehensive review of the city's community safety system and use of the payroll tax revenues and prepare a report. The Citizen Advisory Board's report must include an analysis of the economic impacts of the payroll tax on businesses in the city and an analysis of the progress made towards achieving 3 specific outcomes. Number 1, increase the number of minutes per hour officers are available for community policing. Number 2, reduce the number of calls for service per day to which no city personnel are dispatched to respond. And number 3, reduce the number of minutes it takes city personnel to respond to non-emergency requests for service. For context, in 2019, officers were available only 5 minutes of every hour for community policing, and there were approximately 80 calls for service per day that received no dispatch response. And it took an average of 42 minutes to respond to non-emergency requests for service. Now that we've covered the broader idea of the community safety system and understand what is allowable under the ordinance, let's look more specifically at the currently identified problems and needs that compelled the City Council to start the Community Safety Initiative. At its core, the problem the Community Safety Initiative is trying to solve is that our community safety needs are growing faster than our resources to address those needs. That's creating some critical gaps that impacts people every day. Some of those impacts may be more visible than others. The next several slides provide some examples of gaps for different service areas and potential strategies to address them. The municipal court has a backlog of cases due to staffing shortages and growing demand, and that means it takes more time for people to have their cases heard and resolved. Some people cycle through the court over and over again with repeated offenses. Clearly, there's a need for paths out of the justice system to reduce the number of people who repeatedly return to court again and again without getting the help they need. Meanwhile, there's a lack of stable funding for promising alternatives or paths out of the court system, and many times these programs only have short-term funding, which is not sustainable. Limited jail capacity means that people are released early, and that doesn't keep people accountable for their crimes. Example strategies to address these needs for the municipal court include adding staff to the court and city prosecutor's office, providing stable, ongoing funding to keep and expand programs like community court and the mental health court. These alternative courts help divert people from the criminal justice system and connect them with services that reduce the likelihood that they will reoffend. Adding capacity so that more cases can be heard. The municipal court has already added the ability to provide virtual court appearances, and with additional funding could open another courtroom to help move cases forward more quickly. Funding for additional jail beds and attorneys for people who may not be able to afford one. In our police department, critical gaps are indicated by the fact that the number of calls for service increased more than 30% over the last several years, but the number of staff available to respond to those calls remained the same. As a result, police were not able to respond to 1 out of 3 non-emergency calls for service, an average of about 80 calls a day. The high demand on officers' time also means that they have less time to be out in the community building relationships, which is foundational to their goal of building trust with the community. Example strategies to address these issues include add staff to answer and respond to calls within our police and 911 dispatch center. Add community service officers who are not sworn police officers but can respond to non-emergency calls for service. Add a social worker and additional support for homelessness outreach on police teams. Add detectives, evidence control staff, and a forensic analyst to help investigate more crimes and resolve them more quickly. Add administrative and record support staff to help support the increased workload across the department. Within Eugene Springfield Fire, which also provides emergency medical services, 2 important needs include the funding gap for our ambulance services, which cost more to provide each year because of rising costs and limits to amounts available for reimbursement for services provided. More efficient ways to respond to non-life-threatening calls. For example, when a full fire truck and advanced life support ambulance responds to a call for service that doesn't require an advanced level of care, it is expensive and means those resources may not be available or may be delayed when someone does need more advanced life-saving care. In addition to filling the gap in funding for ambulance services, example strategies for fire and emergency medical services include a call center triage program that would connect non-emergency callers with resources that could make sure they get the help they need, such as a community response unit. The community response unit would be a smaller vehicle that could respond quickly to calls for service and determine if more advanced care was needed. The goal is to connect the community member needs with the right level and type of service. The impacts of homelessness are felt across Eugene. Data shows that the number of people experiencing homelessness is growing. Compared to other cities across the nation, a higher percentage of our homeless population is unsheltered and living in a place not meant for human habitation, such as cars, parks, sidewalks, and on the street. Gaps in emergency shelter resources, like shelter beds, especially for single adults who account for the majority of those experiencing homelessness. Between July and September of 2020, 3,823 people experiencing homelessness accessed services in Lane County. Approximately 75% of those people live in Eugene. This total number includes more than 1,800 people with disabilities and more than 1,300 chronically homeless individuals. Example strategies for homeless services include increasing the number of alternative shelters. Alternative shelters include programs like our overnight parking program that provides safe, legal places for unhoused people to sleep in their vehicles. The Rest Stop program that allows up to 20 people to sleep overnight in tents or Conestoga huts on designated sites with support services. And the new Microsites program that designates areas for up to 6 Conestoga huts or tents and is managed by a nonprofit social service provider. Working with the local organization called 15th Night to reduce youth homelessness. Creating a resource center where unhoused individuals meet on-site with social service providers and get access to the help they need. Increasing the hours that the Eugene Service Station is open. The service station is a place where people can meet their basic needs, get food, do laundry, and take showers, and funding a position in the city to work with community partners and help coordinate these services. In addition to these service areas, the Community Safety Initiative also includes prevention efforts. The prevention team has already hired a youth inclusion specialist who trains staff and works with youth who are challenged, both emotionally and behaviorally, to find effective strategies for those youth to be successful in educational and social environments. Another planned strategy includes launching expanded out-of-school programming designed to promote personal growth and development with a focus on communication, problem solving, decision-making, healthy relationships, and connection to community. This work also focuses on building new partnerships and joint programming for youth in the community who are marginalized. Working with organizations and groups affiliated with Black, Indigenous, and other people of color is an emphasis. This webinar was the first step in the process, and there are a number of other opportunities to participate and provide input into the Community Safety Initiative, including a series of focus groups for organizations representing Black, Indigenous, and other people of color, virtual public meetings open to the general public, an online survey for those that live or work in the city of Eugene.
Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to watch that video. This is a pretty complicated topic, and we wanted to make sure that everybody was sort of starting with the same base level of understanding tonight, or at least getting sort of refreshed on the major components of the Community Safety Initiative. So thanks for taking a look at that. At this point in time, we're going to get started on our queue here in just a couple minutes to get your feedback. So if you do have an interest in speaking tonight, you can go ahead and use the raise hand function there at the bottom of your screen to join the queue. I'll also remind you that, or just recap sort of the 4 questions that are meant to be potential prompts for you, things that you might want to provide feedback on. Those are now posted in the chat as well. So you'll have those to refer to if you would like to use those as part of your feedback. So at this point, I'm going to turn things over to Kevin Altucker, whose voice you will find familiar because he was the staff lead on putting together the video that you just watched. So he's going to manage the queue for us tonight. Again, in order to ensure equitable participation, we're going to be limiting comments to 2.5 minutes this evening. And obviously the timer is there on your screen. You can see that. You will be automatically cut off after 2.5 minutes. And again, that's just our attempt to be as equitable as possible. We have 56 community members attending tonight. We don't know that all of you want to speak, but we do know that we have a lot of folks here who do want to speak. So we'll ask you to certainly share your comments. We want to hear from you, but be as brief as possible so that we can hear from as many of you as possible this evening. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kevin. And again, go ahead and raise your hand if you want to get in the queue there, and we'll get started on hearing your feedback.
Thank you, Jason, and good evening, everyone. I'll be managing the queue tonight. We have folks who are already raising their virtual hands. We'd like to see that. I will announce the speaker and then the follow-up speaker, and I will proceed through the queue accordingly. So our first speaker tonight will be Ben Christensen. So Ben, go ahead. And followed by Sean Shivers. So Ben, go ahead. Ben, are you there? Okay, let's try that again. Go ahead, Ben.
All right, can you hear me?
We can. The floor
All
is
right.
yours.
Is the goal of this body to make the community of Eugene safer? The reason I ask this question is I do not see any reality where increasing the police budget will make this happen. Last year was the culmination of years of police violence, racial oppression trauma, and the impacts of an overly militarized police force. We saw protests in every major city demanding change, a civil rights movement that had never happened in my lifetime that was sustained by millions of people. When I was in college, I had to do ride-alongs with the police during a criminal justice program. It was an eye-opening experience. They approached every situation as though the person they were talking to was guilty of a crime. They used at best questionable methods when interacting with the people. Lies, intimidation, threats, manipulation, and even violence were common tactics. The contempt they showed for the people that they claimed to protect and serve was unbelievable, even when they knew a criminal justice student was watching them. Last year, I decided to revisit police brutality, racism, and white supremacy, and seeing the way that the police used force and violence against the BLM protesters, and then doing nothing to the white supremacists that committed acts of violence was also an eye-opening experience. If the police had just ignored the BIPOC community, done nothing, it would have been at best deplorable. Sadly, this is not the reality. The reality is far worse. So my question is, what's worse than deplorable? The answer is our modern police state. Disproportionate policing is built into the very foundation of our country, and it is the legacy of this country. Increasing the police budget will have little to no positive impact on the white community. In fact, I would say it would definitely negatively impact two more vulnerable groups in our society, the poor and people with disabilities. Ben Franklin said, "The person who would trade a little bit of security, or would trade a little bit of liberty for some security, will get neither and deserves neither." Voting for the increase in the police budget would have almost no impact on the privileged white community, but would send a clear message to the BIPOC community and other vulnerable populations. I'm willing to trade this false sense of security for your religion, your culture, your language, your family, and even your security. But that's not all. I would even trade your life. Spending this money on anything other than the police and other security farces is the only way to address the needs of this community. I ask that you defund the police, the Eugene Police Department, in addition to not giving them any additional funding through this program.
Thank you, Ben. Next up speaking is the Eugene Chamber, followed by Sean Shivers. So go ahead, Eugene Chamber.
Good evening. Hi, everyone. Brittany Quick-Warner here from the Eugene Chamber of Commerce. I'm here to weigh in on the allocation of the funding. We were intimately involved in the conversations of the Community Safety Initiative a couple years ago, and we know that there was an enormous amount of public outreach, public input that helped get us to where we were. Our business community ultimately came out and supported this community safety initiative, but it wasn't with a lot of concern and a lot of angst to be taxing, our businesses and our employees to help fund these initiatives without a guarantee that it's going to work. However, through the research that we did, through the research that we know the city did, we know that they came up with the allocation that they did for a reason. And we believe that the allocation matches the outcomes that they identified that they wanted to try and meet with the city fund. So we really believe that the policies and procedures of the police department absolutely need to be evaluated. And we appreciate the fact that the city's done that to look and ensure that they're equitable and they address systematic racism that has been ingrained in institutions like the police department. But we don't believe changing the funding allocation that was approved by council and supported by community members is going to address that issue. Ultimately, we have to figure out how we're going to address the safety concerns of our community. And yes, addressing the homelessness is going to bring down the number of calls that our police are getting, and we should be addressing those differently than with an armed police officer. However, there is real crime happening in our community that is not being addressed. It's not being answered. I have dozens of examples just in the last 2 weeks of business owners who have called the cops because they've had a serious crime happening on their property and they have not gotten a response. So we know our police department needs more officers, needs more people to respond to these calls, and we really want to see this funding go to actually address those outcomes that were indicated in the original Community Safety Initiative plan. Thanks.
Thank you, Brittany. Next speaker is Sean, followed by Felicia. Sean, go ahead. There we go, Sean, go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
All right, there we go. Thank you so much. My name is Sean Shivers. I happen to serve as chair of the Police Commission for the city of Eugene, overseeing those policies that Brittany was just talking about. And over the last year, we have been on the front lines of addressing those policies, those issues brought to the fore by the murder of George Floyd. But I want to say that good policing takes more time. You're all well aware of the statistics of our growing population, while our safety services have just been getting stretched thinner and thinner, of calls for services going unanswered. But this goes beyond just simple statistics. I think we can all agree that we want our officers to de-escalate incidents and to make as few mistakes as possible. But what happens when you work overtime your police force? When you push them to do longer hours, when you give them less vacation time, you inevitably see more mistakes. De-escalation takes roughly twice as long as simply arresting somebody, throwing them in the back of a car, driving them to jail. And unfortunately, while these forces come together, we're going to run into very real problems where these issues get worse, where our officers have to choose between being ready for an emergency and de-escalating a situation. Our police force and our community need these funds invested, and they need them invested in the police now. Absolutely right. This community safety initiative contains numerous worthy causes, but not all those causes are in quite as dire straits as our police department is. We need more officers to respond to crimes, and we need more officers so that our officers can respond humanely with de-escalation like we expect, with as few mistakes as possible. Unfortunately, dwindling resources will not help any of us achieve a safe community. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sean. Our next speaker is Felicia Figueroa, followed by Corrie Parrish. Felicia, go ahead.
Hello, hi. My name is Felicia Figueroa. I'm a POC living here in Eugene, Oregon. I absolutely don't believe that funding the police is what needs to happen. That doesn't make any sense at all to me. It doesn't make me feel safer in this community. If there's any money available at all, what makes sense to me is to not build more infrastructure for policing. It'd make more sense to have more support for the unhoused community here in Eugene. That's obviously a very big thing happening here. I see it everywhere. And I don't understand why, if there's more money, wouldn't be used for building a safety net and support for the unhoused. Thank you.
Thank you, Felicia. Our next speaker is Corrie Parrish, followed by Jacob True. Corrie, go ahead.
Hi, everybody. My name is Corrie Parrish, and my pronouns are she, they. And I'd like to address the systems and gaps questions of the prompts that were posted for today. And I think both in terms of the system and gaps within our system, the Community Safety Initiative really needs to think about better coordination with other departments, such as the planning department. For example, Vision Zero is a policy here in Eugene to decrease all amount of traffic deaths, which includes cars, bicycling, and pedestrians. And we actually have a plan for this, and it was updated in 2018. And in that plan, there was funding increased for 7 officers and 1 sergeant. And supposedly this group meets with other stakeholders, although we don't know who those stakeholders are according to the plan, to meet quarterly to review traffic crash data, equity data, and traffic safety performance. However, I can't find any of these performance measures online or in the plan. And this is important because it allows us to fine tune on where we need to focus on and Vision Zero within the high crash network from a safety perspective. Again, Vision Zero is to decrease the whole traffic deaths from what it is today to none. And then without the data, we can't evaluate the performance of these officers or evaluate how how traffic impacts different BIPOC communities or hold the police accountable. As many of us know, Eli Rodriguez was shot and killed by the Eugene police just 2 years ago while jaywalking. And while it was justified by the DA, we all have to admit that was preventable. Cahoots could have responded to that. This year alone, Isaiah Wagner was hit in a crosswalk when a driver went the wrong way around a roundabout. And the Eugene Police Department did not cite that driver with reckless driving until after the DA and the grand jury decided not uphold the reckless driving charge. In fact, the DA spent more time talking about the fact that he was at a protest than the fact that the driver broke the law by going around the wrong way around a roundabout. Traffic deaths cost about 11 million for the states, for the United States. And so if we can focus on decreasing and holding our police accountable in terms of Vision Zero, we can create a lot more change that way. Thank you.
Corrie, thank you. Our next speaker is Jacob True, followed by Marianne Senhouse. Jacob, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. All right. I watched that presentation closely, and when I saw how the allocation of funds was sent to the preponderance of carceral services, police, courts, and everything, and just a tiny little sliver to homelessness and aid for them, I was pretty shocked. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me to be allocating this funding source to the police when we could be working on preventing folks from falling into needing to from the police being called on them and all that other sorts of things. The way I see it, if folks are calling the police over somebody sleeping on their doorstep, or then we should give the person who needs a house, doesn't have a place to sleep that is sanctioned, we should give them a place to stay. If there's somebody shoplifting some food, we should give them some food. Solve the problems at the source instead of spending a whole bunch of money on folks with guns to who as you've heard apparently need a whole bunch of training just not to shoot people. We've got a bunch of people who got shot recently by the police when Cahoots could have handled it a whole lot better, I bet. If the police are in need of funding, maybe what they could do is, instead of sending these big expensive Bearcats or tanks or whatever it is on residential streets where my kids are playing, and shouting at everybody, they could sell those off and fund their vacations or whatever it was that the fella said. So I appreciate taking the time. Address the root causes. Give folks homes. Don't spend it more on police. Police can sell their Bearcat if they need money. Thank you.
Jacob, thank you. Our next speaker is Marianne Senhouse, followed by Sally Bell. Marianne, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. So I just wanted to ask a series of questions that would get the committee and the council thinking. The first is, why is the success of the program measured in metrics that are tied to police response? Police right now are getting 60%, more than half of the budget. Nothing, there was no mention of mental health, a budget for mental health. And I'm wondering, how come success isn't measured by, for example, the number of homeless people who are helped into temporary or permanent housing? Cahoots has been recognized nationally, and it's been held up as an example. And this is an opportunity for the city of Eugene to shine. The world is already looking this way. How about we give Cahoots its own budget, take it out from under EPD because it can stand on its own. Give it its own budget, expand the program, and make it as successful as the people who have been looking towards Eugene see it. I think as it is right now, this whole tax is just a funnel towards the police budget to inflate the police budget. And I think that they can do with a smaller slice of the pie. We need to address the mental health issues that we have in the community, and we need to start funding that. And since there is no funding for the solutions for the ballot measure 110, this is a place where the funds can go towards substance abuse counseling. This is where I would like to see the money go. Thanks.
Thank you, Marianne. Our next speaker is Sally Bell, followed by Otis Hashmeyer. Go ahead, Sally.
Thanks, folks. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. Thanks. I'm Sally Bell. I'm Vice President and Executive Director of the Technology Association of Oregon here in Southern Willamette Valley, and I'm a resident in the city of Eugene. Our industry association membership includes a deep network of tech companies and partners across the state and our region, and local businesses in our membership here in the city of Eugene include folks like Concentric Sky, Sheer ID, Pipework Studios, Avant Assessment, Palo Alto Software. These are some of our very influential and foundational downtown tech companies headquartered here in the city. Community safety in our downtown is vital to our economic recovery, and businesses being able to physically return to their offices is dependent upon a substantial reallocation of these crucial funds in order to adequately support our unhoused population. We are on the precipice of high growth in this valley. Oregon's already been identified as experiencing growth as the result of the pandemic, specifically in technology and tech careers. And Eugene has recently made the headlines for one of the most desirable cities to live and work remotely. In less than 18 months, we'll be hosting the Oregon 22 Championships, which will put Eugene on the map like never before. The quality and caliber of the visitor experience and reputation of our community hinges on us getting this right and allocating those funds appropriately. Employers are the mechanism for garnering these funds, and their input and priorities are essential to this process. TAO and the local tech community would like to highlight the importance of stable housing for our homeless and unhoused population. It is a community-wide issue that requires all hands on deck to ensure that we have adequate solutions to issues that may determine the fate of our community to thrive with the projected growth or be potentially hindered. There's too much at stake, and the holistic services and innovative housing solutions are pivotal for our growth and stability. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. Our membership is actively engaged in these opportunities to substantially increase community safety and to make the city of Eugene an outstanding place to live, work, and grow the next generation. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Sally. Our next speaker is Otis Hashmeyer, followed by Brooklyn. Go ahead, Otis.
This is Sandy, not Otis. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Kevin L. Tucker and Laura Hammond, you were in the room when Dr. Gary Mann Ross of the Strategic Research Institute presented the findings of the research that taxpayers paid the consultant for, not according to our will. And the consultant found, doing his professional research, that the taxpayers clearly saw homelessness as a priority. It was a front of mind concern, core value, and public safety was never rated among the top tiers of categorical concerns. And so how are we, when you two staff oversaw that ruse of a process, that ruse of a public input process by which 80% have gone to courts, have gone to cops, courts, prosecutors, and jail beds? And how are we to have any sense that you are not all deeply embedded in the white supremacist system where cops protect property of the capitalists, which Brittany Quick-Warner and Sean Shivers are the lobbyists for? Thank you. Defund the police, and fund homelessness services and housing.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Brooklyn, followed by Amy Raven. Brooklyn, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
We don't need more officers. We need more options. I don't feel calling the police will solve my problems or make us safer. Police don't solve the problems. They don't lower the crime rates. They respond to crime after it happens. They don't prevent it. Our community needs real resources. Cops seem to think that they're the only professionals or people in the community that can solve these problems, and that's just ridiculous. We have some major gaps, like the domestic violence shelter here is often, if not always, full. So how many domestic violence calls are they continuing to answer? Because there really isn't a path to housing for people who are struggling in violent situations. The idea, I just have to say, the idea that police bad behaviors can be excused or explained by like being overworked or tired or is just ridiculous. You don't get an excuse to do a bad job or abuse people around you because you're tired or you have a bad day. We need people who know that and who know how to de-escalate situations and provide services. I listened to a podcast or interview with the sheriff, and he said that the local jail was the biggest mental health facility in Lane County. And he wasn't happy about it. He was just stating a fact. You know, there's more therapists, there's more people there. That is our inpatient mental health facility. It's completely unacceptable. When we have money, you want to take my money. I do not want it allocated to the carceral state and the police. I don't. They have sell their like $100,000 RV that they use to surveil the homeless. They can use that. The money needs to go other places. Thank you.
Brooklyn, thank you. Our next speaker is Amy Raven, followed by Ralph Parshell. Amy, go ahead. Amy, are you there?
Yes, now can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
I want to speak on behalf of increasing the funding out of that CSI budget for homelessness and decreasing it on the whole police, incarceration, enforcement, et cetera. One of the things we have to look at is that, you know, the amount of people now who are homeless in the city are just incredible. And when we think about COVID, and I want you to think about that, the people who are not able to pay rent are homeless. They're going out on the street. They don't have any place to go very often. So the stereotype tends to be those people are drunk, they're addicts, they're whatever, that are homeless. We need to really publicize and help people in neighborhoods see that that is not so. I object to the evaluation of the effectiveness that you was talking about because it measures everything relating to police and the courts, nothing on meeting the needs of homeless specific. And there are no concrete goals relating to homelessness, which they need to have. One social worker to support homelessness outreach. I was a social worker in my life. That's ridiculous. There needs to be real staffing One of the things that's a suggestion is that camps that are set up have a paid camp manager, paid from someone in that community who helps keep order and monitor complaints. Toilets need to be provided, drinking water needs to be provided, more places around town. There wouldn't be as much littering if there were litter places. We live near Amazon community, the slough. Yeah, there's a bike path along there, and there's a trash can, and it says only for dog waste. There's no place people can put trash. One of the things the city really needs to do is to put in lockers for people who are homeless. They have to carry everything on their backs, in their carts, in their grocery carts. They look terrible carrying them around town. It doesn't do the public image any good. You have lockers, they can sleep at night, they can feel safer, there won't be as much crime. The fact of the homelessness that we have makes the community unsafe. We need the money taken out of policing and put into caring and dealing with our bad homeless situation. Thank you.
Amy, thank you. Our next speaker is Ralph Parshall, followed by Corrie Northrup. Ralph, go ahead.
Thank you, Kevin. I would just like to speak to my position as a person that's running a business here in town with 41 employees. And the commitment that the city council made when we looked at this business community promise, and then our need as a community to protect the BIPOC community, and they deserve policing that contributes to their safety, to do it in a way that protects their civil rights. I think that's really important that we do that. And the homeless issue is an issue, both a positive and a negative. My business is close to the river, and I see through my security cameras, I see my property surveilled by individuals nightly. And we pick up the waste that goes on there. And that's unfortunate because it bothers my employees that leave at night. I don't go downtown because I don't feel comfortable there. I'm an old guy and I just do not feel comfortable going downtown because of the situations that take place there at night. But I think the public perception in our community is that it's unsafe, and it's going to lead to loss of business and jobs are what fuel the economy here in this community, to be able to pay the taxes and support the other things that we all want in this beautiful city that we live in. And I believe the business community needs the city to keep its promise. When they looked at this and reevaluate everything that we do with the mindset that's come about in this conversation tonight. But I think we can do both of these things if we really put a creative eye to that. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Ralph. Our next speaker is Corrie Northrup, followed by Ethan Kay. Corrie, go ahead.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for having this listening session for us. I just want to say that I don't feel that police funding is leading to safer communities. The police across the country and here in Eugene are asked to do way too many things that they aren't qualified for or are needed for. And throwing more officers and resources at police agencies isn't going to make them any more effective at doing those things. So why not look at ways of streamlining EPD so that it doesn't need so much money to operate? CSI is looking to add more officers. Why not remove CSOs from our schools? Because having police officers in schools doesn't prevent shootings or other crimes, but what it does do is make Black students and students of color feel unsafe, which has been expressed by many of the youth in Eugene. You could stop purchasing military-grade vehicles and weaponry that are used on Eugene citizens. You acknowledge gaps in homelessness services, which leaves our most vulnerable community members without the support they desperately need. And one way to help them immediately is to stop criminalizing their poverty and homelessness. People resort to crime because their basic needs are not met, and we better serve our community by investing in each other and raising everybody up so they have at minimum their basic needs met. Then they can begin to actualize their goals and visions for their lives. Sean Shivers earlier said that good policing takes more time. He said de-escalation takes even more time. It's much slower than arresting someone and throwing them in the back of a car and taking them to jail. That's the part of the problem. It's that kind of mentality and training model that has led to our overburdened court and jail systems. It's not a humanistic approach. It's treating people as burdens to the community that need to be removed instead of working with that individual's needs and finding ways to support them so they don't need to resort to crime. In many cases, their only crime is being poor or Black. So why not increase funding for homeless services and prevention services? Why don't we ensure that everybody in our community has access to quality education, a stable home, food, and a job if they are able to work and are seeking employment? These basic needs would go much further in preventing crime and increasing safety for everybody. Thank you for the time.
Corey, thank you. Our next speaker is Ethan Kay, followed by what shows up on my screen as first name, last name. Ethan, go ahead.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So I just kind of want to echo Jacob's points about addressing problems and issues in the community, tackling them at the source and not throwing all this money onto services that are more reactive. I strongly support, funding houseless services and services towards more robust mental health services, things like that. Again, being proactive about these issues that affect our whole community, and not again throwing it towards reactive services. And then just more generally, at least for me, I feel like that should this money go to the police department, or should a great amount of this money stay with the Eugene Police Department? That would be the city, telling me and ostensibly turning their back on the community after years of issues and complaints regarding police violence, and then just kind of at the peak of this social justice, racial unrest over the past summer. I feel like that the city would ostensibly be turning their back on the community and saying, well, we heard you out, but we don't really care that much about what you have to say. So that's really all I can say on that matter, and I yield my time.
Thank you, Ethan. Our next speaker, first name, last name, followed by Sarah Lamog. First name, last name, go ahead.
All right. At the recent sweep of the North Bank of Willamette, the representative of the city, Brian, said he didn't know of any place displaced community members could go where they could safely live, but the sweep and police barricade were needed for safety. Arrests of people who EPD have criminalized related to the protests at the end of May last year are ongoing, though I doubt anyone could explicate ways in which community safety at this point has been endangered by those events, or how EPD's investigation is accomplishing anything beneficial for community safety at this point. Jails continue to be sites of danger and disabilitization for community members, including those who have not been convicted of anything. The state has prioritized paid and unpaid laborers for carceral settings for vaccination, but COVID precautions were ignored to the point that community members forced to stay in jail pre-trial went on hunger strikes. When we talk about community safety, we need to look at what we mean by safety. Safety needs to be the addressing of needs and harm in the community. Policing is not an approach to safety oriented towards meeting needs and reducing or restoring harm. Policing sees unmet needs as something to be disciplined and punished. It fundamentally ignores the causes and temporality of needs and harm in order to criminalize it, discipline it, invisibilize it. Safety does not come from silencing and punishing needs. It comes from addressing them. Safety cannot be about maintaining an illusory status quo. It comes from listening to the needs and hurts of community members, deciding to be with them in that trouble because we care more about each other than about a sense of peace and stability, and refusing long tried and long failed strategies rooted in a history and historical present of racist, sexist, classist, ableist power structures. We must let go of naive and unrealistic carceral logics and have the courage to look problems in the face. We don't need more police. We don't need a faster court system. We need to make caring about people in our community the cornerstone on how we define safety in our city. I hope that everyone will consider that and be well.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Sarah Lamog, followed by Claire Barnum. So Sarah, go ahead.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. So as you announced, my name is Sarah Lamog, and I am a citizen of Eugene and work in the downtown area. Looking back on the last decade of my professional experience, I have a good balance of working in both public and nonprofit sectors. From 2014 to 2017, I held roles in workforce and economic development to see what economic impact really means. And in 2018 and 2019, I switched gears to serve in AmeriCorps, a time where my main mission was fighting poverty and ending houselessness. So having all of these experiences, which range in location from Los Angeles to Phoenix, Arizona, to a tiny town in West Texas called San Angelo, I have direct knowledge of what communities actually need when working with local municipal entities and business leaders. Community members, especially the most vulnerable populations among us, deserve better. I demand a change to the proposed allocation of funds, defund the police, prosecutors, courts, and jail beds, and instead invest in prevention services and houselessness as a priority. Thank you, and I yield back my time.
Thank you, Sarah. Our next speaker is Claire Barnum, followed by Ellen Rifkin. Claire, go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Claire Barnum, and I work downtown for Downtown Eugene, Inc., which represents the property owners and businesses of downtown. The promise of the payroll tax was to meet the current needs of our community safety services. We applaud the ad hoc committee that has been put together to look systemically at our community policing, and we encourage the continuity of those conversations. Businesses are really struggling to keep up with the daily challenges they face. Day after day, we receive calls from businesses and downtown employees dealing with aggressive and threatening behavior, human waste, trash, drug needles, active drug use, graffiti, and more. Downtown should be a safe place to work. It should be a safe place to play and enjoy. The current environment is unsustainable, and we are facing a real risk of losing local businesses and the jobs that those businesses support. We are asking the city to please keep its promise and move forward with the allocation as originally presented. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Claire. Our next speaker is Ellen Rifkin, followed by Rob Fassett. Ellen, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. The mayor said at the beginning that this conversation about community safety is front and center about communities of color. But the needs of these communities are not situated front and center in the proposal with which we are presented. I am angry and disappointed that the needs of those who are unhoused, among whom BIPOC are disproportionately represented, are so stunningly disrespected in the proposed distribution of funds. 80% of these funds are directed to the criminal justice system, a system that does not have the trust of communities of color and historically was never meant to, and just as importantly, is fundamentally unrelated to meeting basic human needs, including housing, whose fulfillment is the only true basis for safety and security. My remaining remarks echo those of the person called first name, last name. Safety services are not police services. Safety means a transformation of how all of us, not only police, relate to each other so that we view each other not as potential threats, but as belonging to a common web. In this web, when we see people without homes or without enough to eat or without resources for physical and mental healing, we start talking about how we can be there for each other, how we can create caring systems for housing, education, employment, the arts, and public health. We don't start talking about arrests, jail beds, response time, and efficient prosecution. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. Our next speaker is Rob Fassett, followed by Michael Hames Garcia. Rob, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Rob Fassett. I live in Ward 2, and I'm submitting this testimony on behalf of the Southeast Neighbors Human Rights Committee. So we urge council to invest heavily in increasing safety for the unhoused and root cause crime prevention while reimagining the sort of public investments that address those issues. Eugene's done this before with Cahoots and is now looked to as a national leader on non-police response to mental health crisis. We can continue to lead in building a community that protects us all. We urge council to direct no less than 80% of CSI funding towards support for the unhoused, root cause prevention, Cahoots, and Cahoots-like services. Prior to enacting the CSI, the council reviewed survey results showing that when asked to name their front of mind issue of concern for the city, a wide plurality of 40% responded homelessness. The number of unhoused people in our city is growing by an estimated 178 people per month. With limited sanctioned camping space, unhoused people lack other options but to camp in unsanctioned spaces where they're perpetually criminalized, harassed, and swept, leading to traumatization, immiseration, and increased risk of premature death, especially in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. Our unhoused neighbors illustrate the experience of many vulnerable groups, that not all community members enjoy equal safety at present, nor will more policing increase safety for all. Since 1 out of 4 arrests in our city are of unhoused people, investing 6.5 times as heavily in additional policing as in unhoused support services and root cause prevention will make many vulnerable populations less safe through more arrests, more caging, more court dates, and more unpayable fines. Investment in support services and prevention rather than policing decreases call gaps and court volumes by working to address the social inequities rather than criminalizing people and using brute force deterrence. We have a list of suggested projects to fund for addressing houselessness and prevention, which we'll deliver as written testimony by email. During the recent Eugene Human Rights Commission meeting, lamenting the scale of houselessness in our city compared to the resources available to address it, Commissioner Grove said that it just isn't realistic to expect a medium to small size city like Eugene to be able to afford all this. While this is undoubtedly true, if the safety of our vulnerable members and neighbors can be reduced to a question of money, there's this money, it's here, it's available, and we urge council to use it as a down payment. Thank you.
Rob, thank you. Our next speaker is Michael Hames Garcia, followed by, I'm gonna jump over Jacob. You've already spoken. If we have a second round, which looks like we might, we can catch you on that second round. So our speaker up now, Michael Hames Garcia, followed by Leah Scott. Michael, go ahead. Go ahead, Michael. Michael, go ahead.
There we go. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, thank you. Good evening and thank you for this opportunity. I'm a person of color in Eugene. I teach at the University of Oregon, where I have taught classes on, among other things, policing and criminal justice for close to 2 decades. I'm currently a member of the Eugene Police Commission and the Civilian Review Board. In the past, I've been a member of the Board of Directors for Sponsors, Inc. and for the Community Alliance of Lane County. And pertinent to this, I live and own property in downtown Eugene. I find it great that the City Council is interested in community members' opinions on these issues, but the questions the City Council is asking are not questions for which the answers are opinions. Questions like what makes communities safer, what reduces homelessness, and what most effectively addresses drug addiction are empirical questions that scholars who study these issues have answered. I literally teach an entire university class on this, and I'm pretty certain that increasing a city's police budget does not positively correlate with most accepted measures of community safety. As an aside, reducing police response times is a very, very strange measure, as opposed to, say, reducing the number of calls requiring a police response. And the same is true of increasing the number of jail beds as opposed to reducing the need for jail beds. I want to echo and reiterate some of the points that have been made by previous speakers about the need to prioritize solutions for the unhoused population in the city, the need for expanded services for domestic violence, or responses to domestic violence that don't involve police responses, and a drastic rethinking of the metrics. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. Our next speaker is Lydia Scott. Lydia, go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, I think it's great that there's an opportunity for public comment on this. I was shocked to hear about the payroll tax and see the allocation of the budget. And so I just want to thank everybody for some really great testimony tonight. And in response to the question, would you change the proposed allocation of funds for the Community Safety Initiative? Absolutely. The safety initiative, to me as a community member, and I haven't written anything down, so I'm just kind of talking through this, but as a community member, it really sounds like the city is looking at community safety as policing. And so it seems like clarifying, is that how we want to deal with our safety, is just by creating a police state where we need an ever increasing budget and always going to have to increase the amount of police, and being on that kind of feedback loop of a police state? Or do we really want to look at it as, how do we create safety in our community, and what are those needs? And people have said a lot of really great things tonight, around addressing root causes, and the homeless issue in our community is just ever growing, and there's not enough resources, not enough funding. This safety plan doesn't even really seem to have much inclusion of really addressing mental health, which we know is a huge issue in our community, contributing to houselessness, contributing to people not feeling safe, people not having access to the resources they need. Cahoots has a huge workload. And just for an example, like when I've had to deal with the police, and I've had some really traumatizing experiences, so adding trauma on top of trauma, I dealt with Cahoots, and who also are way overworked, understaffed, underpaid, and had a very different experience of feeling supported and like I was actually going to get help. And Cahoots has this national attention, and it's like there needs to be more resources. It can't just be all of the weight of mental health falling on Cahoots' shoulders when they don't even have the budget for it. So I'm running out of time here, but absolutely. And it's really important that this doesn't even address issues of racism and white supremacy as issues around safety in our community, which absolutely need to be.
Thank you, Lydia. Our next speaker is Bonnie Dominguez, followed by Catherine Elizabeth Hunt. Bonnie, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Bonnie Dominguez, and I'm also one of the people on the Police Commission. I started last year, and I've been trying to address the issues as best as I can. And I have some ideas. I'd like to echo what Lydia Scott just said. That's wonderful. Also, what Mr. Hines Garcia said as well, and a lot of people also. Actually, everybody that talked about homelessness, I echo all of that. Also, I would just like to bring up that domestic violence, again, is something that I think is very important. When I was on the, what is it called when you're on the jury, but it's the general jury, I forget what it's called. Anyway, beside the point, there were a lot of people that came through that were being abused. And it was so sad because this one woman I won't mention her name obviously, but this one woman at first was very adamant that she had been abused, and then because I know it, I can tell, she didn't have anywhere to go, so she pulled out her charges. She wasn't charging the man anymore because she wasn't going to have a place to go. So we need more shelters for women. That's the kind of safety thing that we need. We need places for people to go. I know somebody that was murdered 3 weeks ago. She was going to go through a divorce. There has to be a way for us to have a system where people that are going through divorce, like sometimes people don't expect it, but they get murdered anyway. We need a system that has like an alert. Like if we're not dispatching people, like if we're not dispatching the police out all the time, well, we need to have an alert system that says, well, this person is going through a divorce, so there's a possibility that there is danger there, so we need to have that addressed. Another thing is the United Kingdom. I know that the United Kingdom does not have guns everywhere, and I understand that police officers want to have guns, but the thing is that I don't really think that we need to have guns. Their system is very interesting. It has you have to ask for specific permission to have a gun. New officers do not have guns. You have to put in a special request after you're a sergeant and have to have specific reasons as to why it is that you need it. If we wouldn't have guns, we wouldn't be shooting people. And I think that maybe if we had officers that were identified as gunless, not armed, that would be really helpful to the community. It would create a feeling of safety. Like, why do traffic officers need guns? I don't know why, but even if you had drugs on you for some reason, you probably would feel a little calmer if the police officer didn't have a gun. Just saying, there would be less violence. Okay.
Thank you, Bonnie. Our next speaker is Catherine Elizabeth Hunt, and it looks like Catherine is the last person in the first round. And then we can go into, well, I see another couple hands. People haven't spoken yet. So Catherine, followed by Casey Barrett. Catherine, go ahead.
Mute. Am I unmuted?
You are unmuted and we can hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I would like to see a larger portion of the funds put towards housing and basic survival needs. This should include permanent housing as well as transitional housing. And how about putting some funds towards training and paying the lead people in the microsites, as well as the agencies supervising the sites. I would like to see more prevention services being provided for people, especially for mental services. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. I'm trying to give everyone an opportunity who has not spoken yet in the first round here. And I'm checking my list to make sure that yes, okay, I think I'm correct. Casey Barrett is next. And then looks like Siobhan Cancel is the next speaker. So Casey, go ahead.
Thank you. I would just like to add that I am for the current proposed allocation of funds for the payroll tax. It was designed at the time when we were looking at the needs of the community. It is fitting the current needs of the community and the crime wave that we're seeing, the crimes that are being committed that are not currently being enforced. A lot of wonderful ideas have been shared here. They all require more resources. They all require more funds. And that's what this payroll tax was about. That's why we stepped up to be able to increase our community safety, increase our response times, increase the amount of officers, also other public safety support individuals that we had out there on the streets to help deal with these matters. So I will be brief, but I am in support of the current allocation and believe and have seen it in my last 16 years of working downtown. It is the worst it has been, and we need this support to be able to improve the conditions of downtown Eugene and make it a place where people want to spend their time. Thank you.
Thank you, Casey. Our next speaker is Siobhan Cancel, followed by Trina Cleland. Siobhan, go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thanks. My name is Siobhan Cancel, and I want to say thank you for hosting this listening session. I've been very pleased to hear some of our community members speaking to what I would say. I would like to add just a few more points that I feel is important. With this safety initiative, I think we really have to look at it as, are we looking to protect our individual warm-blooded community members, or are we trying to protect more the businesses that make up our downtown area? As a person of color, I would like to echo that no more money should go to EPD. If you take a look at their budget, I'm sure that there are ways that they could recompile it so they could get those additional officers. I would also like to recommend that we have additional funding that is separate from EPD's budget go to Cahoots. Our community is in pain and we are upset. I personally feel that you keep asking for our input and then choosing to ignore it. I know that for the businesses, and especially the ones downtown, they are negatively affected by the homeless population. However, I do not believe more police is going to solve that problem. Like many people have said here, we need places for people to go eat, have a roof over their head, get help to get back on their feet. Mental health is a huge issue here. We can't just keep asking for armed patrols to solve our problems. It just goes so much deeper. And as a person of color, I'm already traumatized by local police officers here in town. So I don't even feel comfortable engaging in the police system or the courts. So over 80% of that budget would not affect me positively, and I would dare to say it will affect me negatively moving on. One last thing is, I think education could be a really good key factor. Getting this sort of information out to individual community members and not just heads of associations would help. And then also giving us more opportunities like this one to give our individual feedback, because we are a community of individual members. We are not conglomerates. Each one of us is special and has our own unique needs. And if you really want to keep us safe, then you should listen to them. Thank you.
Siobhan, thank you. Our next speaker is Trina Cleland, followed by Allison. Trina, go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate this chance to speak. And thanks to everybody on the call with all their opinions and thoughts. It's great to have community input into this very important discussion. Again, my name is Trina Cleland. I just moved to Eugene about 5 years ago and very much love it. Just think it's a great place, very high quality of life for me. But not for everybody. But before I go on, I do want to thank, again, anybody on this call who's done anything to make Eugene what it is, uplift it, and lead it to become such a fantastic, mostly progressive in a lot of ways, community that I'm really proud to call home. And to kind of help contribute to the community, I've gotten involved in the Egan Warming Center and First Place Family Center. And by the way, I also volunteer at the Jazz Station downtown when it's open. And I don't have any problem going downtown at all. I know a lot of people do, but I'm totally comfortable there in the day or in the evening. I just wanted to say that I guess when it comes to safety, it seems pretty clear to me that the most unsafe people in the community are those that don't have homes or a place to live where they can close and lock a door. So I guess I would sort of just come back to basics and suggest that we all kind of think about, like, okay, when we're talking about safety initiatives, who needs safety the most? And it's folks who are poor, don't have a comfortable place to live, hungry, don't have a place to wash up, don't have a place to go to the bathroom. You know, they're struggling, they're being moved around, their stuff is being thrown away. I mean, that's a crime right there. Let's face it. It's really obscene that this kind of immoral activity, immoral in the sense of society not taking care of people, is allowed to go on, and we all kind of turn our heads and look away. So time is running out, so you get the gist. I just want to say that I really agree with those who would like to see more of this budget go to homeless prevention, homeless services, and housing. Thank you so much.
Trina, thank you for that. Our next speaker is Allison, followed by Defund EPDX. Allison, go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. There have been a lot of great points already said tonight, so I will let those speak for themselves and won't reiterate those too much. As far as the budget goes, I agree with the vast majority of speakers tonight in saying that EPD does not need additional budget. They do not need any additional funds going their way. I did hear early on someone speak on the fact that officers are overworked and that they're just stretched thin, and that might explain their lackluster performance or the performance that is troubling to a lot of members of the community. If that's the case, that is an even better reason to fund the programs that would alleviate some of the calls that the police are getting. I don't think that if they are stretched thin and not performing well, that is a time to add more money. Let's relieve some of that pressure. Let's put it to appropriate resources, have those calls go to the programs that can actually assist in those situations, and give EPD an opportunity to properly manage the officers, to give them appropriate vacation time with the officers that they have, to get that settled first before building and adding on top of it when they have not been able to manage the funds that they do have. It has not been a benefit to this community with what they've been able to get so far. Obviously, the homelessness issue is a giant issue for our community. We absolutely need to fund more programs that are not just a Band-Aid on the problem, not just sweep them around to give us a short relief from them visually. We actually need to help these residents of Eugene. They are also Eugene. They live here. They breathe the same air that we breathe. And if we invest in them, then we can uplift them to help them contribute to our society as well. Awful to think about someone living out there, someone going through different life stages out. Just last night, it got down to 29 degrees. It's awful to think that there are people out there sleeping without a roof over their head. I know don't have much time, but we also need to think long-term. Let's think about education, other side programs that can help reduce crime in the future as well. Thank you.
Allison, thank you. Looks like our final speaker in this first round is Defund EPDX. Go ahead. Defund EPDX, go ahead.
Okay, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, go ahead.
Okay, it is the end of March now. Already at least 3 homeless people died in Eugene. Honestly, I don't know how the city officials can sleep at night when these deaths happen in the city they are serving. Being homeless not cause death. Being treated like criminals and being harassed and swept like dust by EPD, increasing stress of being homeless. This stress leads to mental health and physical health crisis, like heart attack and stroke. EPD has little training and skills to work with the homeless population besides of acting violence. Chief Skinner made a statement with the whole page size of his picture regarding Derek Chauvin trial, the murder of George Floyd. It's a typical complicit behavior of white supremacy. EPD still spend the money and the resource to arrest people who were at the social justice protest on May 29th in 2020, after George Floyd was murdered. EPD worked collaboratively with local violent white supremacists for decades. Chief Skinner still has not released an official statement on the investigation process publicly, if there was an EPD officer at the DC on January 6th, after over 3 months request. Former EPD officer Christopher June sexually assaulted a domestic violence victim who is identified as Black non-binary. Christopher June placed on leave May 28th. Later resigned June 10th, 2020. I haven't even talked about the Eli Rogers and Charlie Landers and Brian Babb and all these who were killed by EPD. Eugene needs more social service to build a safe community. Defund EPD, stop funding money to those who are sheltering for violence, rapists, and murders. Thank you.
Thank you. Looks like we're at the end of our first round. We have 21 minutes left. I'm going to go back to the queue for the second round. And our first speaker is Jacob True, followed by Sean Shivers. Jacob, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Mady True, and I'm a mental health provider. I work with the state of Oregon. I work with, majority of my patients have been unhoused, and all of them have had police contact. A great deal of the work that I'm forced to do with these patients is undoing trauma that they've accrued through their experience of being houseless. The high risk for constant theft, risk for sexual exploitation, and as well as a lot of trauma related to their experience with the police, including coercive interactions, and abusive behavior in the jails. So I would encourage the city not to, in the interest of public safety, in the interest of efficiency with our already very strained mental health programs, look at primary prevention. Look at things that reduce the need for these services, reduce people's trauma, help people's overall well-being, as opposed to increasing the availability of these services that often just compound people's problems, add debt, add legal obligations they're not allowed to make. I'd also like to point out the tactics of the two officers that have testified tonight, including one who I believe is testifying after me, that they're saying that if they don't get more funding, then they may continue to be abusive. If, what he said previously was that when they're not funded adequately, well, that's when mistakes happen. That's when inhumane behavior happens. This is the argument of organized crime. This is the argument that if you don't give us more, well, bad things might happen to your community. Nice community you have there. Shame that, I hope something doesn't happen to it if the police don't get this funding that they are demanding. There are evidence-based solutions, many solutions to the problem that Eugene is experiencing. None of these require increasing funding for the police. This is a nonsensical solution. Really, that seems to be driven by the police themselves, who want more money for the system that they've been indoctrinated in. Yes, they say they've changed some policies. It's no longer their policy to be racist. It's their policy to be slightly less racist. But let's take a big step back at what the real underlying problems are here and look at primary prevention, look at evidence-based solutions, of which there are many. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Sean Shivers, followed by Lydia Scott. Sean, go ahead.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. So I want to clarify, I am just a citizen like all of you. I've been involved in the in Occupy Wall Street. I agree with so much of what I've heard tonight. I also want to say that I knew Charlie Landeros before their death. I knew them when they bought the gun that they eventually walked into a middle school with. And I never planned on talking about this publicly, but when they bought the gun, I asked them why. And they said, when they called the police, when their daughter was being harassed, nobody showed up. So they knew the police would not protect them. Officers who receive calls, when our department receives calls that they cannot respond to, it has real consequences for the rest of our lives. We don't just leave crimes, we don't just leave businesses without enforcers. We leave fathers and mothers without support. We leave children without trust. It is not acceptable to ignore the very real consequences of community justice and how those systems negatively impact one another. It is complicated. It is not simply a competition between our police and our homeless services. We work hard in Eugene. We have been ahead of the ball to develop a system to catch criminal cops, to punish them, and we will constantly be improving on that system. I've heard so many excellent ideas from so many people, and I want to reiterate, I agree with so much of what you've said, but we also need good cops. We need to give them the time to de-escalate situations. We need to give them support from our community to ensure that everyone receives quality service from our department. Thank you very much for your time. And if anybody is interested, my email is publicly available on the Police Commission website. Please don't hesitate to reach out for a more in-depth conversation.
Thank you, Sean. Taking a look now at the folks that we have in the queue for the second round, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people. That's going to take us right up to 8 o'clock. I'm going to suggest that we close the signups and we'll cap it at that 10 people. If for some reason we are done and we have more time, we can open it back up. Our next speaker then is Lydia Scott, followed by Bonnie Dominguez. Lydia, go ahead.
All right, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great, thanks. Just quickly in response to that last comment, just as an example, when I hear you, there can be slow response times because of overworked and, you know, trying to respond to too many different calls that maybe some of them they don't actually need to be responding to if other services were better funded and were available. But when I needed to talk to an officer because my daughter had been assaulted and it took them like almost a month to get back to me, when they finally did call me back, and anyway, I won't go into the whole story. I had a lawyer at that point, and I said, well, I think at this time you could talk to my lawyer. They hung up on me, whereas Cahoots, when it took them 24 hours to get back to me, they apologized for the delay in getting back to me. So just in terms of, you know, the systems that we already have, the police we already have, maybe dealing with some of the approach so people could feel safer could be a starting point, and how they're valued in our community. The average median salary for a police officer is $56,000 a year. The average median salary for an emergency EMS worker is around $36,000 a year. So just, you know, they are valued in terms of monetary value anyway in our community. So I just wanted to get back to the end of my last comment, brought up briefly the issues of racism in our community, and feel like that's really important in terms of there being gaps in community safety that weren't identified in the webinar. The mayor talked about centering people of color voices and wanting them at the table, and yet in this whole community safety plan, there's not any funding allocated towards, you know, dealing with racism and white supremacy in our community. So I just wanted to add that. I yield back the rest of my time.
Thank you, Lydia. Our next speaker is Bonnie Dominguez, followed by Ben Christensen. Bonnie, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I've been talking to some volunteers that are helping with the homeless community, and one of the ideas that I've been hearing a lot is actually having an alternative dispatch system. I'm going to read this out loud, by the way. Establishing an alternative dispatch system using law enforcement when a complaint only involves prohibited camping and there is no threat to public safety or crisis response necessary. Instead of directing callers to the Eugene Police Department's non-emergency line or public works, create a one point of contact type reporting system available online or by phone, staffed by trained information and referral specialists, possibly managed by a designated nonprofit to assess resource needs, track interactions, and provide follow-up communication. That was written by Ian Winbrock, who is a police commissioner and is also working with homeless people. So I think that this idea is valuable. For one, one of the ideas that I was hearing around volunteers is that the dispatch system would, first of all, take some of the duties of the regular police dispatch system off of them. It takes that burden off, because the police is being distracted by a homeless problem that isn't really something that they can solve at all. So, and then the other thing that I was hearing is that, sorry, I can't see my time. The other thing that I was hearing is that if you have an alternative dispatch system, then that dispatch system, this different service, like maybe it could be cahoots. They can dispatch somebody to the person that's complaining and have them kind of calm them down and have them maybe even learn to have some empathy for the people that, you know, are homeless. So for example, I had a camp near my house and I heard them screaming and yelling at night, but I don't know where I was taught this, but I was taught empathy, and I knew it just like, you know, I yell in my house and they don't have a house. So, you know, just let them be. And I understand that they're outside. So just let them be. So kind of teaching that empathy, but also alternatively, because maybe they are creating noise, because a lot of the complaints are noise complaints, is my understanding, then also send somebody out to the group themselves that's not like a uniformed officer to kind of help the situation over there, whatever's going on, provide some kind of guidance or counseling over there. So it's just an alternative dispatch system. Again, I've heard it from many groups, so please consider that. Thanks.
Thank you, Bonnie. Our next speaker is Ben Christensen, followed by Corrie Northrup. Ben, go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I'd like to echo one thing that I heard a couple of times and then build upon it. One of the major issues that the police department, especially the Eugene Police Department, has is an issue of transparency and willingness to provide open information to the general public. This does nothing to build trust in the community. And one of the things that they say in the initiative is they want to build trust in the community. I don't think increasing the budget will do that. And I don't think adding police officers will do that. I think that the Eugene police being held accountable for the actions they've chosen, like the violent attacks on people during the curfew after the start of the George Floyd protest, many of whom were in their own yards, and the lawsuits that were brought before them as a result of that violent action and the use of riot police unnecessarily, and the release of tear gas and violent impact munitions and militarized weapons would actually go a long ways towards building trust. This isn't a question of budget or funding for the police. The police department in Eugene is fundamentally flawed. It's built on a premise of white supremacy, and they use force and violence and intimidation as their main source of maintaining that. They don't understand what building trust is. There's been times where I've interacted with the police and then I try to put a camera in their face. The first thing they do is tell me to leave. And they say, if you don't leave, I'm going to arrest you. They don't tell me why they're going to arrest me, because they can't. I'm standing on a public sidewalk and I'm recording them. It's my legal right. But then they'll still tell me, I'm going to arrest you. If you don't leave now, I'm going to arrest you. That's not how you build trust in a community. I've had that happen with a Eugene police officer. This is not a problem of building trust. It's a problem of there's a fundamental flaw in the Eugene police, and giving them more money will only give them more power with which to use force and intimidation and violence against the most vulnerable people in our society. This is the problem we face. I don't understand how the community can't see this. The vulnerable people that will be impacted are your BIPAC community, your people with disabilities, you're homeless, and you're poor. That's who's going to get hit the hardest when you put $20 million into policing. That's who will be impacted. Those are the people that will be the most harmed by this budget. That is the problem we face. And if you can't see that, I can't see how you can miss it. The numbers all say that's the case. I yield back the rest of my time.
Thank you, Ben. Our next speaker is Corrie Northrup, followed by Michael Hames Garcia. So Corrie, go ahead.
Again, thanks for the opportunity to speak one more time. Just had two short things. Just want to respond to Casey Barrett, who said in his over 16 years working downtown that it's been the worst it's ever been. And you know, much of that is because it's harder and harder to make a living in Eugene and all over the country right now. And there are fewer services to help people stabilize their lives. And on top of that, the system is just set up in a way that works against them and makes it nearly impossible to get out of it. So, you know, we're looking at it the wrong way. It's looking at it as a problem for someone to be around, just existing, when the problem is that they're not getting support and not having the opportunity to actually have their basic needs met. you know, if you ask people, 99% are not excited about their situation and aren't actively choosing it. They are just out of options. And the last thing I want to say is it should be, you know, abundantly clear, but of all the speakers tonight, only 3 have been okay with the current allocation of the money from CSI going to policing. Everyone else is not wanting the police to be funded this way and to have more of that funding go to alternatives, including homelessness and prevention services. I know that you're collecting feedback in an array of methods, not just on these listening sessions, and I'll be curious to see what kind of written testimony you get and what comes of the surveys. But to me, it seems like the community is speaking loud and clear. From what I understand, last week's listening session was similar. There's just way more people that are not interested in giving the police in Eugene more money. Thank you very much.
Corey, thank you. Our next speaker is Michael Hames Garcia, followed by Defund EPD X. Michael, go ahead.
Hi there. So I believe I mentioned that I live and own property in downtown Eugene. I would like to invite anyone who is afraid to come downtown to reach out to me. I'd be happy to escort you around my neighborhood, hear your fears, and see if I can speak to them in any way. You can also find my contact info on the Police Commission webpage on the city's website. Thank you.
Michael, thank you. Our next speaker is Defund EPD X, followed by Otis Hashmeyer. Defund EPD, go ahead.
Actually, I think I accidentally raised the hand. I finished my speak already. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. Thank you. Our next speaker is Otis Hashmeyer, followed by Rob Facette. Otis, go ahead.
This is Zandi Zinke, not Otis. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
I want to call out the white supremacists who spoke tonight, Brittany Quick Warner, Sean Shivers, and Casey Barrett. I want to underscore that Casey Barrett is the grandson of the former mayor, Brian Obey, of this town, and he has recently received a 10-year tax break on one of his developments worth in excess of $4.5 million. This was to build housing, and that housing, the entire second floor of the building he built, rents for there are 400 plus square foot studio apartments and 500 square foot one bedrooms. The one bedrooms are renting for $3,000 a month. This is in Casey Barrett's building downtown, and the studios are renting for just under $2,000 a month. This got a tax break from the city, and now Casey Barrett is here trying to take tax money, regressive payroll tax money from all the taxpayers in order to get for a police state to guard inequality. That's what this is about. We are taking more and more of the people's common resource well, not more than when we stole it from Calapooians. However, the elites in this town, as everywhere, are tapping into the common resource in order to guard their inequality. That is what Brittany Quick Warner is a lobbyist for, what Sean Shivers is a lobbyist for, and what Casey Barrett's family personally profits from hugely. This is about to happen also with Mark Thromeyer and with Mark Mixis, who are looking to have 3 acres of land granted to them for free with $4 million thrown in at the riverfront. Meanwhile, the city names the riverfront street after 2 Black residents and the Calapooian name for duck. This is a sick charade, a cover-up for white supremacy, and we have a paradigm of white supremacy rooted in capitalist inequality, and it must end. And anyone, including city staff like Kevin Altucker and Lori Hammond, who continue to work for the system without changing it, are white supremacists.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Rob Facette, followed by Pamela Kraus. Rob, go ahead. Rob, go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Yes. Hi, this is Rob Facette, this time just speaking on behalf of myself. I just wanted to comment on something that it struck me during the video. Was talking about youth support for people who are marginalized, for youth who are marginalized, and this accounts for about 3% of the funding from the presentation, from the initial allocation. And I mean, it just led me to ask, marginalized by whom? Marginalized suggests some action, something's being done to someone by someone else. A marginalized person is just a human being who, in the context of their existence, is placed at the margins by someone else who's in the center. And so I think we have to ask who that someone else is in the center who enforces keeping marginalized people in place at the margins. And frankly, it's the police, it's the social support structure that we have built, the education system, the city's choices of how they spend their money and what things they choose to fund, what things they ignore and choose to put at the margins. I mean, these are the same systems that have orchestrated that marginalization of those people that this strategy is plunging more money into. So as far as being, how I feel about the strategy, which is one of the prompt questions, that's kind of what I wanted to say about that. And beyond which, there's an EPD RV currently camped outside the campsite at 13th and Chambers 24/7. It says Community Safety Initiative on the side. I mean, it's like a dystopian nightmare, this continuous surveillance in the place where they live. I didn't notice 24/7 dystopian surveillance of vulnerable populations in the video because I think, in principle that that's dystopian, and so wouldn't pass the smell test with people you were selling this to. So, I mean, no house person in my neighborhood would accept that sort of 24/7 surveillance of their home and bed, even if the express purpose was for their own safety. But that wouldn't happen because they're not marginalized. This is the act of marginalization, the act of determining and enforcing who will be assigned to the margins. And this is an example, 24/7 surveillance RV at a campsite, which is ostensibly funded by the CSI, increasing that marginalization, not increasing safety. I yield my time. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Pamela Kraus, followed by our final speaker of the evening, Kamal Gatson. Pamela, go ahead.
I think I'm unmuted, correct?
You are, yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for holding these listening sessions. Hopefully, what are some of the huge ingredients that are coming out tonight in this conversation will cause us to look at a much bigger picture and investigate some of our presumptions and assumptions about who others are in our community. I also issue an invite, and I know that some city councilors were recently formally invited to come to Washington Jefferson Park and actually meet some unhoused people who live in the park because they don't have dwelling. I'm issuing you, please, a blanket invitation to be on the street, engage, offer yourselves as presence with anybody, especially somebody who may not have had someone look directly at them or speak to them kindly for a long time. I spent my morning this morning, which happens often, right away. I couldn't wait to get into town to go be with and visit with and listen to my unhoused friend who's in her late 60s, who sleeps on bare sidewalk in our community. I don't even know how she's surviving. So something's happening here, and a lot is becoming clear in my estimation. And there are reasons why there are lots of awareness trainings, trauma trainings, and skill trainings and legal trainings going on about how to be people who can stand in our truth with our legal rights up against a front of police departments. Our presumptions and assumptions of who we are, what we own, and what credentials someone to be okay and included in our embrace of community is something we really need to pay attention to, and that includes racism and white supremacy and Nazis in our community. Thanks.
Thank you. Our next speaker, Kamau Gatson, and Brooklyn, I see your hand. You will be our final speaker for this evening. So Kamau, go ahead.
Hello, can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. I'd like to say thank you for the time. I wanted to get on here and add my voice to the plethora of voices that have already spoken in support of reducing the current allocation of 80% of this new tax payroll to the EPD. And I would like to also testify to my personal experience with some of the law enforcement officials here. More police will not make us safe here in this city. I am a person of color here, and I have had several interactions with the police where I have felt threatened, intimidated by their actions of staring and gesturing with their weapons on their hips as I am passing by. This is not a good feeling. So what I'm saying is that we don't need to give the police force any more time. We've given them enough time. We need to give our marginalized community some more time. We need to give the homeless more time. We need to give the disabled more time. We need to give the people of color more time, not the police. Thank you.
Thank you. And our final speaker tonight, Brooklyn, go ahead.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. I had heard a few people saying that they feel really unsafe downtown and really maybe unsafe around. I mean, when we talk about crime, I'm like, what crime are they talking about? I haven't witnessed any crime coming out of the homeless communities personally. I don't know. You know, I know that cars get broken into and things like that. But I don't feel unsafe downtown. And I just feel like that's a real specific experience that isn't shared by everyone. And the idea that more patrols and more police would make you feel safer, and that might be some people's experience, but certainly not mine. Having more police downtown would keep me from coming downtown, would make me feel like I lived in a dystopian hellscape. And I also wanted to point out the surveillance. I mean, I don't think that everybody needs management either. I don't feel like the services necessarily have to be management and more positions for middle class social workers to have work. I think that they need housing and money. And that's we don't need more programs necessarily and more jobs for other people. They just need homes. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Brooklyn. That does conclude the second round. Jason, I'm going to toss it back to you at this point in the meeting. Thank you, everybody, for providing testimony.
Great, thank you, Kevin. And yeah, I just wanted to wrap up by thanking all of you for being here tonight. We appreciate your time and your commitment. I feel frankly honored to be part of a community where this many folks show up and provide your comment and your input. And I know that our council will be super appreciative of everything that you've shared. I know some of you shared some tough stories and shared a lot of heart and passion and vulnerability. And I want to thank you for showing up in this space in that way. Speaking for myself and on behalf of staff, I want to say we really appreciate you being here to do that tonight. So thank you again for your engagement this evening. A reminder that if you have additional comments that you'd like to share, or if you want others that you know to share their feedback, please do send them to that community survey, the CSI survey link that's in the chat there and that you'll find on the city's website. Again, that survey closes tomorrow at the end of the day. So you want to make sure that you get any and all feedback in via that survey by tomorrow. And then a reminder that following that, staff will be summarizing all of the input that has been received, and that will be coming back to council at a work session on May 10th. So you can look forward to that and seeing sort of how all of this information comes together for council then. So Thank you, everyone. Again tonight, thank you for your engagement and helping to make our community a better place. So have a wonderful evening and a great rest of your week, and we hope to see you soon. Thank you.